Hey Grias, welcome back to Lex Gria's podcast. I'm your host Alexis, and today we are closing out this series on what is the big deal. And if you haven't listened to any of these episodes, I highly recommend you so that you can get on board of what this journey has been like for anybody that has been listening to the first episode where we talk about artificial flavoring and dyes. And then we move forward to one particular dye that I feel like needs to have more of a regulation on versus just allowing it be in the open in the US. And then we move on to organic versus GMO, where I just talk about the pros and cons as well as some basic understanding of being able to identify these things in the supermarket or even in your local grocery store so that you'll be self-aware. Because hey, if you don't feel like going to a doctor for an extra visit to figure out what is this and what is that, I'm here to tell you. So that being said, I just want to give you guys a quick update on my life. It has been a little bit chaotic for me, but I am finally here. So I've been actually rehearsing for a showcase, and it is the after party, and it's in Richmond. So anybody that's from the RVA area, you can definitely hit me up and I can send you the link. Or you can also go on richmondurbandance.com and you can purchase tickets there. And before we start, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button, if you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasters, and Spotify listeners, if you don't mind rating, as well as giving some feedback about my podcast. Highly appreciate it. And let's begin. So, this episode is a mix of gut health as well as the microbiome. And what is the big deal about these? So, I recently came into interest of learning more about the microbiome, and the sole purpose of that was when I was watching a series on Netflix called The Life Hack of Gut Health, and it goes about everything, and it mentioned the same thing that I seen on another series called Twin Experiment, where they give twins that are identical to see if they can change their microbiome based off of what they're eating, if they're vegan or a meat lover type thing. So they do these tests to see if they can essentially manipulate these people's microbiomes by essentially saying you can still live a healthy life by eating this versus someone telling you shouldn't be eating this at all and you should be on a strict diet or you should be exercising more. But for you to understand what you need to understand your microbiome. So that's where I'm here to tell you what the key factors are and more. So let's get started. So we live in a society where our lives within us, both inside and outside of our bodies, and is collection of all microbes, such as bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other genes. And if y'all don't believe me, you have your good bacteria and your bad bacteria. And they naturally live on our bodies and inside us. So like I learned this probably like I don't even know. Maybe in high school when someone mentioned like you know that you have bad bacteria, you have good bacteria on you that you wash away every time you get in the shower. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. While you have that feeling like you feel like you got something on you, that makes totally sense now. Or it could be just the debris and stuff from outside, but who knows? And so, what comes to all this, and why will we have all of this in our body in the first place? Because anytime we hear any of these, where we think of the opposite, right? When you think of bacteria, what do you think of? Or when you think about a virus, what do you think of? You don't think of anything good, right? But I'm here to tell you these are the good ones and not the bad ones. And this is a huge contribution in big ways and human health because the way they protect us against pathogens that help our immune system develop and enable us to digest food and produce energy, which a big factor plays keeping a balance in your overall health. So you had to think about this. For you to have something good versus bad, you have to have maybe bad for the good to fight it off. You know what I mean? So essentially, that's how like the mechanism of good bacteria and bad bacteria. Your good bacteria essentially is overpowering your bad bacteria by probably making it into good bacteria. So of course you want less bad bacteria, but of course you want that good bacteria. And if you don't have either, then what's happening to your body then? So there is microbiome living in and all of our areas of our body and are diverse. So when I say that, I mean like diversity in a way because your microbiome in your lung might be different than what is in your heart, and then your intestines, like your gut, is different than all over your body. So microbes have different way of working within your body. So every microbe in your body does not work the same in each and every organ that is in your body. And the ones that's been a key factor in changing things in the future is the gut. I would describe the gut as the your second brain essentially because that's where everything passes through and everything goes through, you know what I mean? Good or bad. So that's why I say gut is like probably your most key important organ in your body besides your brain obviously. But that's a key factor in regards of how it operates certain things. And we will discuss that later on today. So, with the first years of a person's life, a person's microbiome core is a form and the factors of how a person eats, whether they're on a diet or not, and what medications are being taken. So, essentially, like when you're a baby, most babies, especially infants, are prescribed antibiotics. So, like amoxicillin, we probably all had some type of antibiotic that we had to take because we were sick and they just gave it to us. So those are the bacteria fighters. So when you have a bad bacteria versus a good bacteria and that good bacteria is not doing its part, that's when the antibiotic plays its part of essentially eliminating that bacteria because your body's still trying to figure out how to fight it and make a what is it immune immunity essentially. So that's why when we get all these vaccines and stuff when we're little, and then we don't really need to get them until later on, maybe if we need a follow-up, if they notice that in our blood we don't have immunity and stuff. So those key factors as well and are being taken, and environmental exposure can also change your microbiome. So with that being said, obviously when you're young, like that's why certain things like when you're younger is more crucial than when you get older because that's when you really can't undo certain things. Like some things just stay the way they are. No matter how bad or good, sometimes based off of genetics, there's no undoing it. So that's why people tell us, hey, you're young now, but when you get my age, blah, blah, this. And you're like, oh, no, 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 no big deal. Because, like, I feel like in this generation, we're a little bit different than I would say, older generations. I would say maybe like the technology as well as the way of how science has grown and developed with certain things that they didn't have back then. I think we have a more ability to catch things before they happen, or if we need to change our habits or even change anything that is affecting our health, we can do that. So let's begin exploring the dynamics of the effects that the microbiome has on the outside of the body. So, if we ever think about when we're going outside or exposing ourselves to certain qualities of anything, so if we are exposed to certain environment exposure where it may lead to health effects and help determine an individual's standability to illness. So when they say that, it's essentially within a environmental exposure, it can also affect a person's microbiome in ways where they may have increased the likelihood of developing conditions. So I find that very interesting because, most of the conditions that we think about, right, are common diseases such as diabetes, allergies, inflammatory bowel disease, and more. So if you think about it, so you're telling me that the environment that I'm in is affecting my possibility of my microbiome being changed and then maybe being a source of a cause of me having a particular illness or disease. So that can be the case in most people. But obviously, if someone, again, has family history or anything, then yes, you might be more prone to get those. But for someone that's relatively healthy and doesn't have any health issues or doesn't have any background or known illnesses, that's where this might be a play, or it might work in both ways. It just depends on how you play it. So, for example, the change in the gut microbiome has been linked to liver health. And this is where we got into finding the connection of this. So, researchers have developed a way of using a stool sample to detect microbial changes that accurately diagnose liver fibrosis and cirrhosis. And this is huge because essentially, not only like most people, we know that like most people, when you turn 50, you have to get a colon test and stuff. But they're also finding other things that are affecting your body just by a sample of doing the same thing that they do with a colon test. And I also saw a series on Netflix, which I mentioned earlier, where they talk about the gut and how they said taking a capsule of someone else's stool, which obviously when you like hear it, but you'll understand it when you watch the series, but it is kind of crazy. But the way that they describe it and how they actually explain to you what they're actually doing, it like makes total sense in a sense of way, because at the end of the day, for you to mm, essentially cause your microbiome to change in any aspect, it has to be exposed to either a good bacteria or bad bacteria. And in this way, they're researching in ways where the microbiome is to improve someone else's microbiome. But of course, this hasn't been known to be told by us. It's just new discovery. And I think they were overseas, the people that were describing this. They were not in the US. And she actually has her own museum. So if you guys want to check the Netflix series called Life Hacks: How to Improve the Gut, you can definitely check that out. And that's in the early stage, and hopefully in the future can change people to have less health problems, because essentially we don't want to hear like, hey, you have this, hey, you have that, and then you have to just take a pill. No. So of course, for me per se, we go to the doctor and we're told to take this medication when something is wrong, right? And it's never anything else besides that in most cases, depending on who your doctor is and how they practice and stuff. But in reality, most of them go stick with the books. They don't try to go extra unless they are passionate. And I feel like if you're going to be in that field, you should be passionate. But you have some doctors that are just overwhelmed and just quick to the chase and say, yep, you're good, and not even think twice. So obviously, with this being said, this can be taken both ways. Like you have some doctors that just give patients medications and don't even think twice. Because you have some patients where they're like, why am I taking 5 types of heart medications? There could be a reason, you know what I mean? They trust the doctor because the doctor knows what they're doing, because they have the degree, they have the knowledge, and they've been to school long enough to achieve that. So we just think that when something is wrong, and they obviously don't, in some cases, and especially if you go to like maybe a hospital or ER, they definitely in some cases won't go too in depth in regards of doing all that. But also, I do know that you can go to a holistic doctor, but why should we spend that extra money just to go to a doctor like that, rather than just knowing the synthetic and natural remedies to do besides medicine? So, meaning like, hey, give me options. Don't let this be my first option. And then when it comes to science, you also don't want to do that either. So it's like, why can that just merge in, marinate essentially? Unless it's really necessary, then I can understand it. But of course, you have a lot of information about why this is bad for you versus why this is good. And what would bring red flags in my head, because in society, to be honest, there's so many products out there that affect us, but does it weigh out the good stuff? Because even with the environmental exposure, like being stuck in traffic, the traffic related air pollution is more high in some areas, and it can alter respiratory microbiomes in children. So we have to think about what we want in the future. For those that see it as more than just information given to us, like, we need to take that information and, in a way, embrace it to people. Give it to them lightly. Don't be like, oh, this is that and that is that. Like, we're just giving you basic information where it makes sense on your end. Because I even learned this when I was in pharmacy. I had to talk, when I talk to patients, I can't talk to them how I talk to my colleagues when it comes to us talking in pharmacy, like pharmacy terms. They might not understand what I'm saying when it comes to their medications, what side effects this does. They might have to, that's where the pharmacist comes in play and elaborates. So you would think when it comes to your doctor, they would try to elaborate these things. But of course, like I said, there's so many doctors out there that study this. So you have your gastrologist doctors, you have just everybody that studies in one area. But then at the same time, why can't we just have basic information? So then if we do have an issue, then we can go to those doctors versus, hey, something's going on with this. Because I learned also in anatomy that when it comes to when you say, hey, my back is hurting, you're not really telling them like what part of your back is hurting. So like when you talk about anatomy terms, obviously nobody's going to know anatomy terms unless they take an anatomy. So there's pain points. So then if you point, in a way, if you point to where the pain is at versus just saying, hey, my back, because they might think it's just your whole back and then prescribe you diclofenac gel, which is used for like just pain, or gabapentin. So it just all depends on how we elaborate things and how we ask those questions and just kind of do our own research, as well as understanding that we can essentially live the life we want to, or live a healthier life without changing our aspects and stuff. Like, yes, we know the generic stuff about being healthy. Hey, maybe you need to work out more. Or, hey, you need to eat healthier. Or, hey, you need to do that. But the key is in your microbiome. That is your key. And your gut, of course. Your gut is like how we describe it, the hollow organ. And everything passes through it and everything goes through it. So just keep that in mind. But then your microbiome is also like that in a way in every parts of your body and every part of your organs. They all have different work to do. But it's very important to be able to understand that. So then That's where we feel like we need more information. And when that information does come, then we can probably change things in a different direction when it comes to certain things and be able to make certain decisions in regards of what is actually necessary for each and everybody's health. Because when I was watching these series on Netflix, they did elaborate certain people's types of background as well as what like type of body shape they were, if they needed more fat or if they needed more muscle. Because like even for myself, like I've been to the gym before and exercise for a good 2 to 3 or 4 months because I was planning on doing other career choices. But when I noticed when I was at the gym, I started losing weight versus gaining weight. And also that too could have been a factor of me not eating as much meals because I was a big snacker, but now I am eating more meals and I noticed the change of my body developing. So maybe I just needed protein. But of course, when you just go to a physical check or anything, they ask you if you have any questions. That's where you want to elaborate and have like an actual conversation. Because let's just say this, I'm a type of person too that likes people to ask questions like that are related to my field. So then I can be able to learn or maybe find some new information and talk to my peers about it. Because it's all about a community and it's all about growing together. So we are actually going to close out this episode and close out this series. And I hope that you guys enjoy. And don't forget to check out the last two episodes that were recently posted. So I had organic versus GMO and red 40, as well as artificial flavoring and more. So if you haven't tuned in to any of those, I highly recommend you tuning in to those as well, where I dive into what is the big deal. And I hope to see you guys again. And thank you for listening. For now, goodbye.